So thank you first for letting me speak today. I spent 26 years on active duty, followed by 15 years in industry. The job I just left in January of this year was CEO of a company called Sparton Corporation. But before I went to the academy, I was actually enlisted. I enlisted as a regular sailor, went to boot camp in 1974. And those of you, I see most of you, many of you, are old enough to remember this. Back in the day, if you wanted to go to an airport, as we did when we finished boot camp, we were bused from Great Lakes to Chicago O'Hare. You generally had to go through a gauntlet of anti-war protesters outside the airport, and then of course you had the Hare Krishna anti-war protesters that would be inside the airport. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
And as I was going through this gauntlet in 1974 after boot camp, going through these anti-war protesters, I felt something wet on my face. And I was shocked to turn and see that some lady, one of these protesters who was closer to my mother's age than my age, I was 17, was spitting on the sailors as they were walking by. And you look back on that, we weren't fully out of Vietnam in '74, and the anti-war protesters hadn't figured out they had won the debate, right? They were still doing this. They didn't know what else to do. You look back and you look today and see how veterans and active duty service members are treated today. And what a remarkable difference. We're so happy, pleased, proud that the country treats our active duty folks and veterans significantly better than I remember from my enlisted days. And aren't we great? Aren't we so happy that now the common thing to say to veterans is thank you for your service, right? So you might be surprised to hear that one of the messages I give to companies that I speak to about hiring veterans and about helping their veterans to succeed is to stop saying thank you for your service. That surprises you to hear me say that. But I really believe it's something that a certain category of people need to stop doing, and I'll speak about why in a moment. Over the course of my 15 years in industry, I had thousands of veterans working for me. I personally hired hundreds. And the sad news is we didn't have a lot of success with many of those veterans. Back when I was transitioning in 2006, I went through the Navy's what we call Transition Assistance Program, followed by another officer-focused program was run by a company called Rulin. And it didn't take me long in industry to figure out that nearly everything I had been told during those transition courses was wrong. Nearly everything I'd been told was wrong. And one of the things we were told was a lot of veterans will change jobs within 2 years of transitioning to industry. But the thing that was correct, but the wrong part of it was that we were changing jobs because we would become dissatisfied with the work environment we found ourselves in. And the truth was, we were changing jobs because we were failing, not because we were dissatisfied. And that was something that it occurred to me we needed to work really hard to correct. But as I became a hiring manager on my way up to be CEO, I learned that nearly every veteran that came to us, that came to work, to interview, they all suffered from the same defects. And this is how I figured out that this problem was systemic, not one-off, that everybody was coming this way. And why is that? The first thing I talk about was impedance mismatch. And what impedance mismatch is the expectation that the veteran has when they're taking a job and the expectation that a company has when they're hiring that veteran are misaligned. So you start out with this break in perception. The second one, the veteran almost always thought they knew more about how to succeed in industry than they really did. And I talk about the need to, regardless of what your rank is, I've counseled 4 stars transitioning. When you start out in industry, you're a second lieutenant again. You don't know what it takes to succeed, and don't delude yourself into believing that you do. The third thing is, hey, in the military, we're all great leaders, right? But like I tell my active duty friends, leadership is hard, but it's even harder when you're leading people who can actually quit. Leading, you need to adapt your leadership style in industry. And a lot of folks, a lot of veterans, particularly those who succeeded at senior levels of command, had a really hard time learning this. And the fourth thing is they frequently overestimate their street value. And so they don't understand how much there really is to learn how to succeed in this new environment. And why do these things happen? I call it the veteran circle of failure. The first thing is the military services teach them the wrong stuff as they're transitioning. Then veterans tend to ask the wrong people for advice on how to succeed in industry. It's like, I give the example, it's like you want to learn to fly and you're asking everybody how to fly except real pilots, people who have succeeded at flying. And that reinforces this really bad advice they've already gotten from the military services. And the third thing is the companies who hire them are very proud of the number of veterans they hire. Every company out there can tell you how many veterans they've hired. What they can't tell you is how many of those veterans are still working for them 5 years later. How many are succeeding in the position they've hired them into. And so you go back to the services. Why do they fail? It's not their fault. They actually use contractors to do most of this training, and the people that are doing the training are generic trainers. They haven't been out there, they haven't succeeded, and the folks writing the curriculum haven't either. So it becomes the blind leading the blind. What I call the altruistics, and MOAA is one of those. I'm a MOAA Life member. I love MOAA, right? But if you go look at the part of MOAA that prepares the curriculum that helps officers transition, and you say, well, where did you come from before you came here? Came from active duty. Oh, so you really haven't been in industry. You haven't figured out what it takes to succeed in industry before you helped write this curriculum on what it takes to succeed in industry. And that's not unique to MOAA. Every one of the altruistics, this is true. Because it takes a long time to succeed in industry. So you've done an active duty career 26 years, and then it might take you 10, 15 years to get to that level where you really know what's going on. And only when you get there can you start helping people figure out how to succeed. And there aren't many of those people, because that's end of career, right? I'm 65, and I'm just talking about this stuff now. That's end of career. And you don't bring people who are end of career into these kinds of positions. And then you've got the companies themselves. They're very proud of the number of veterans they hire. And I said a little while ago, I started telling companies, stop saying thank you for your service. Why? 90+% of corporate leaders have never served. They're quasi-intimidated by those who have, and they have a really hard time having difficult conversations, particularly with veterans who achieved a fairly significant level of command responsibility on active duty. So if somebody's failing, nobody wants to tell them that they're failing. If their leadership skills aren't what they should be, nobody wants to tell them you need to re-baseline the way you lead your employees. And so rather than have these hard conversations with them, they let them fail. So I start saying to these corporate leaders, look, if that ethos, thank you for your service ethos, is causing a broad line to be drawn between your veteran employees and the rest of your employees, stop saying it. Erase that line. You need to treat them and have the same expectations from them that you have from everybody else. If you don't, they'll always be different, and their failure rate will always be higher. So, towards the end of my corporate career, I was counseling veterans one at a time, mostly as they came to interview for me or called me and asked me for advice. And I said, this is very inefficient. There's got to be a better way. I looked for a book that got it done. There weren't any. There are books out there, but they're not written by hiring managers. They're written by headhunters, recruiters. They're written by flag officers who didn't have to fight to become CEO or to get promoted. There wasn't one. I decided I needed to write these lessons down myself. If I were to do it today, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't do it. 2 years and a lot of money to get there. I didn't want to write this book, but it's done. And so I'm not here to sell the book. What I'm here to say is that we need to normalize the way we cause veterans to transition to industry and essentially treat them just like everybody else if we want them to succeed. And that's my message to you today. Thank you very much, and hope to be chatting after our meal. Thanks.